Hello and welcome to another episode of Culture Club. Over the last few weeks, as part of this podcast, we've been exploring what culture is all about, and we've been talking about the cultural distinctives that define our church proclaimers. And last week, if you were listening, you'll know that we came to the fifth of the 5 culture points, but we definitely didn't come to the end of our conversations on culture. We think there's still so much more to say about this topic of culture, and what we're going to talk about tonight has been woven into the DNA of our church in much the same way that the culture points have in terms of what we do with culture as a church. So we're doing things a little bit differently. Tonight, Sam Cousins is joining us, as well as being joined by Pastor Tom. So I'm excited about the conversation that the three of us are going to have this evening. And this kind of heralds the beginning of a few things we're going to try out with the Culture Club podcast over the next few weeks. But we're really excited about this opportunity to dig in a bit more to what we call the 4 C's of culture. We'll come to those in a little while. But Pastor Tom, I know there were some other things that you were keen to share about culture before we got into them. So over to you.
Yeah, great. When we talk about culture, what we're actually talking about is the ideas that are behind our church, the customs, the social behavior of our church. We're talking about what makes proclaimers proclaimers. Most churches around the world have a very similar theology, especially churches in our world, but there are divergence right across the way. You know, there's various houses of churches, and each of those churches, there's something specific about them. And what it is, it's the ingredients that go into making up that church. It's like our way of life, our way of doing things. In the early days, we talked about, back in those very, very early days, Phil, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, we talked about what does our church taste like? And I can still remember the look on everybody's faces when I asked that question. What does our church feel like? What does it smell like? I remember one Sunday service, we had bread makers right across the auditorium so that our church would smell like freshly baked bread. And thankfully, we were able to use it for the communion service. Other people said popcorn. And so we got some popcorn makers and we made our church smell like popcorn. You know, these are small, tiny little things, but they go to what make up our church. We wanted to be a creative church. We wanted to be a church that would innovate. We wanted to be a church that attracted a certain group of people. One of the things that we need to understand about culture, and, I'm conscious of the fact that the guys in Bratislava are listening to this as well, is that culture embraces people, but culture also expels people. One of the illustrations I would use all the time is that when I lived in Thailand, I was accepted into Thai culture because of certain things. Other people were expelled from Thai culture, again, because of the ways that they acted and they behaved. Learning language was a very important part. If you've been in Thailand for more than 5 years and you don't know how to speak Thai, you were slowly pushed to the side. Food, eating food. The Thai pastors used to say, "We really like you." I said, "Why is that?" He says, "You'll sit on the floor and eat with us." So, there are things that embrace you and you embrace in the culture, but there's times when culture expels you. And so in the early days, we did lose a lot of people who just couldn't grab a hold of what we were trying to create. We weren't trying to create anything horrendous. What they mostly got upset about is because we were trying to be an outwardly focused church, not an inwardly focused church. We weren't just luxuriating in self-indulgent worship. We wanted to be an externally focused church that had our eyes on those that were unchurched. And we wanted a church that the unchurched could be happy with and connect with. And that really upset some people. So not everybody's going to understand what you're trying to do. Not everybody's going to get what you're trying to do. But for those who want to get it, will get it. And as we begin to explain our culture from biblical mandates, people begin to connect in with what we're actually trying to say. But this is where the point of correction comes in. It's great that we've got Sam here. He would be the most recent of the people in my circle that when I brought correction, there's been times of saying, what you did was not in line with the culture of our church. This is how our culture operates. One of the other comments that we make all the time is what you tolerate, you endorse. Nothing changes unless you bring correction to it. These are all the things when it comes to creating culture. When I was living in Thailand, I had to learn how to why appropriately. It's not like, like a combination of Cambodian and Japanese. It's very quintessentially Thai. And you needed to learn how to do that so that you could be part of the culture. As a matter of fact, we're probably going to start doing this from now on in our church, because there'll be no more handshakes. So let me just pause there and see what maybe some of you guys have got to say about what I've said so far, just quickly.
Sam, I guess I'm conscious that I was around, in the early stages of watching as culture was created. You're someone who's come along later on. Tom's talked a bit about how culture maybe expels people, but I guess someone like yourself was embraced by culture. What was that kind of experience like, I guess?
I think when it comes to being embraced by culture, I think you have a choice. Obviously, there are times when you're getting to know a new culture and understanding a new culture, you might not flow with it immediately. And there have been times, I'm sure Pastor Tom can tell you many stories of times when I haven't flowed with the culture, but there have been times when there's maybe been some confrontation, or I've had to understand the culture a little bit better. And it's in those moments when you, as an individual, get to choose whether you embrace the culture as well, and whether you decide that actually, yes, I'm going to flow with this culture. I believe in this culture and what we're doing here as a church. Yeah, I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to change the things that I'm doing so that I can fit in with this culture.
Changing attitude towards it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, changing attitude. I think, there have definitely been some times when it's maybe taken me a little bit longer just to think some things through and change my attitude towards the culture. But I feel like, as I've come into an already established culture, there have definitely been times when I've had to choose to flow with it. And if I don't do that, then I'm gonna be expelled from the culture, because you can't clash with it.
I think sometimes people miss the importance of the culture in shaping the way that everything else is. I think we've had people who come in and they love the way that church is, and they think, oh, the services are exciting, the preaching's relevant. I love the way that this is an environment into which I can bring my friends. And actually then when they say, well, I want to do more, I want to be a part of this. And that's the point at which that culture is something that they then have to make that decision you've just been talking about, whether it's something that they're going to personally embrace or whether they're going to, actually react differently to that. Because that's the point at which, well, actually the reason that it is the way that it is because of the culture. And then actually, we've seen times when people have wanted to rub up against what the culture of the church is like, and have found that actually we don't produce what it looks like on a Sunday or in our community without the culture that underpins that. And actually it's when you embrace that you kind of can fully take your place in it, I guess.
People ask this question a lot. Why do you do this way? Why are things done this way? What is it about proclaimers that you have this way of doing things? And that's when we get the opportunity to if we go through those 4 C's, we get the opportunity to begin to create culture in the hearts and lives of individuals.
Yeah. So that's the first of the 4 C's, isn't it, Pastor Tom, is to create culture. You've talked a bit about it already. Is there more that you want to say about creating culture?
When I think about creating culture, I remember the comment that Gary Clark used many, many years ago. He talked about us being cultural architects, that we're actually the builders of the culture. Those of us who have it in our heart and in our spirit, we're the architects of culture. So we ask ourselves these kinds of questions. What kind of culture do you want? And so in our church, we wanted a culture where first-time visitors would feel welcome. They wouldn't feel overwhelmed. They could understand what we were talking about because we gave people loads of opportunities to understand why we were doing things in our service. So what kind of culture do you want? Then we began to define those ingredients of our culture. And when we began to do that, people began to go, oh, okay, what is our future? What is our purpose? Why do we exist? For instance, we used to say things like, if the church doesn't see people connecting with Jesus on a regular basis, we're like a car yard selling cars, but nobody's buying. And all you've got is a lot full of cars. And that's not what we wanted as a church. We wanted a church where the unchurched would come in and would be compelled by the Holy Spirit and everything that they saw and experienced to receive Jesus Christ. That's those people who had never touched a Bible, who had never read a Bible, who had no contact with church in their past. And so the kind of church we wanted was a church that was outwardly focused, that would be reaching people in today's modern 21st century world. What do we value? Why these particular ingredients? And, I remember the prayer of Jesus, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. We want God's authoritative rule in the life of our church. That's what we want. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Bringing the will of God into the life of our church. There are so many churches out there that conduct, I don't want to be critical, but they do things in a way which is not attractive to the unchurched. We didn't want to be like that. We wanted to be a church that was attracting the unchurched. So we needed to start straight away, right now. I can still remember the first rehearsal I ever went to. When I said, no, we're going to start singing Hillsong songs. Oh, but we've been singing these songs for years, I know, and that's a problem. And so actually wean the music team off of those songs and onto the other songs. It was not easy. They were not very compliant. I don't think any of those people today are leading worship in the life of our church. They could be if they'd wanted to. Explain, teach, understand the subtleties of language. This is what goes to create culture. I'll let you guys chat.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's really helpful to outline, I think that the journey that we go on through the 4 C's is about people becoming fully engaged in the life of our church, really, and fully engaged in all that is possible because of culture. And I think one of the most important things about creating culture is you're someone who, if you're someone who's joined our church, if you're a volunteer in the life of our church, if you call Proclaimers home, that actually the most important thing when it comes to creating culture, the first of the 4 C's, is actually just to recognize that the culture has been created on purpose, that it's by intention, that it didn't happen by chance. We talked in the very first podcast that culture either happens by design or by default. But the culture that we came to did not just, like 15 years down the line, we ended up where we are by accident, but actually there was a lot of intention and design that, as you say, it's meant to reflect the culture of the kingdom. It's meant to be externally focused. It's meant to be a place that embraces people, whosoever, wherever people are coming from, whatever walk of life they're coming from. Even people who have never had any experience of church can come in and encounter Jesus. And actually, I think it's so important as the real important thing with the first of the 4 C's is not that we necessarily expect everyone to create culture, but actually to recognize the culture has been created. There is a reason why we do everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's always opportunity for the culture to grow, and over time we find better ways to communicate things and better ways to do things, etc. But I think I loved one of the conversations you had earlier in this series that you need to earn the right to be able to speak into that as well.
When we're creating culture, it's specifically in the area of creating, I think, leaders who can carry the kind of culture that we're seeking to create. And I can still remember sitting in a church somewhere in Denmark, and the pastor said to me, I don't have any leaders. I said, stop. So at the end of the service, I said, there's a leader, there's a leader, there's a leader. People that have got a spark of the divine about them. And those are the people that you want to seek to work with. That's why, it's more important to have spirit over skill or character over charisma. I remember in the early days, someone came to me and said, well, if you had the opportunity to have a skilled team of worship leaders or an anointed worship leader, what would you want? I said, well, obviously I'd want the both kinds. But I would go for skilled worship leaders because I can teach them about the anointing. I can't teach musicians how to do their bit, maybe I can help them when they sing and they go off key and stuff like that. But, it's learning how to carry the culture wherever you go. There's a big challenge there.
And I guess that's the second C of the culture, isn't it, Tom? Of becoming a leader, of becoming fully engaged, is to carry culture. And I guess that's the great challenge, really. And Sam, you've already articulated that being a decision, that actually you choose to be someone who carries culture by embracing it and saying, well, these are characteristics that I'm going to take on. And actually the first thing is to say, I'm going to take on these characteristics in my own life, isn't it?
When I went to Thailand, I desired very, very much to carry Thai culture. That's why I wanted to learn how to speak Thai. That's why I wanted to understand the customs and the social behavior of Thai people. I wanted to understand their food. I wanted to understand their music, because I had a burning desire to reach the Thai people. In the life of Proclaimers, we've got a burning desire to reach those that are unchurched. You know, I mean, typically it's 6 to 8% of a city in Norwich that would actually attend a local church. And why is that? Why are the 90% of people? Because we've not touched them yet. We've not given them a reason to be wanting to be part of us. But what we need when it comes to carrying the culture is we need people who are saying, I so desire to reach my city for Jesus. I am going to carry this successful culture. You know, I've had people say to me, oh, I don't like Hillsong, you know, blah, blah, blah. I say, what is it about Hillsong you don't like? They see hundreds of people coming to Christ every weekend. Okay, you may not agree with every aspect, but hey, carry that culture. You know, be responsible to be part of a team that's carrying the culture to see people coming to Jesus.
I think carrying the culture, even like within your own life, as Phil was saying earlier, you know, we've had so many stories from leaders in our own church of how that's impacted not only, you know, the area that they serve in church and whatever, but even in their own personal life. You know, our culture points, pursuit of excellence, generosity, flowing together. It's amazing how those outwork into your day-to-day and the impact that has on the people that you rub shoulders with every day as well. You know, when you start implementing the culture, the incredible culture that we have at Proclaimers into your day-to-day life, people can't help but notice that there's something different about you. They can't help but notice that there's something that sets you apart. And, you know, that's one of the incredible things about our culture, is it actually opens a door for us to talk about Jesus, to, you know, connect people into church, to slip that invite into conversation somewhere, just because we pursued excellence in doing the little things that we've been doing in our day-to-day work or whatever that is. You know, as we embrace the culture in our own lives, actually that helps bring people into the conversation of what is church? Why are you doing the things that you're doing?
Let me talk about social media for just a few minutes. You know, it's like it's okay for Christians to be insulting, sarcastic, outrageous, belligerent. It's okay because it's social media and I can say what I want to say and this is my opinion. You know, I have a different view. We want to be people who carry a different culture. On social media, we want to be people who are adding value, who are kind, who are humble, who are gracious, who are wanting to, reach out to people around us and to, like I say, add value, to encourage, to inspire. You know, there's some things on social media and I just shake my head and I go, well, thanks. But, you know, there's nothing much I can do with that. I would prefer just to keep scrolling. But you need to make a decision that you're going to embrace that. And you embrace it because we understand who we are, what we're doing, our DNA. You know, D.L. Moody said he had a vision one day. God said, Moody, you're a lifeboat. Save as many as possible. And I'm thinking, yeah, I want to save as many as possible. You know, Wesley says, don't give me a parish next to church bells. He says, I want a soul saving station on the very edge of hell. I'm going, yes, that's what we want to be. And because we're so passionate about seeing people come to Christ, there's a willingness on the inside of us to actually do whatever it takes. I'll clean toilets because I want to see people saved. I'll serve tea. I'll do the hoovering. I'll meet people in the car park. I'll introduce myself to people in the atrium because I want to see people come to Christ. This is the DNA of our church. This is the culture of our church. And the ingredients that goes along to them, alongside of them, are really, really important. And it's important for us to carry that. We see people who won't carry it, you know, in certain circumstances. We're trying to do church. And there are people who come up with every excuse under the sun why they can't be there for the rehearsal. You know, they decline on PCO, but without giving any information. You know, there are people who want to be critical or complain. You know, the Spirit of Christ in us is not a critical spirit. You know, we want to be known for what we're for, not for what we're against. It doesn't mean that we're not against stuff, you know, but what we're for is the most important thing. And that's what people are embraced by that kind of a spirit. People want to be part of that. We say to people, you can belong without believing what we all believe. And people go, well, that's great. I do want to belong. I do want to belong to this family. There's something about you I really like. And eventually they make a commitment to Christ. So carrying the culture is really, really important. All of our leaders need to carry that culture. Otherwise, we've got leaders that are out of sync and out of kilter with where we're going, and they respond in ways or react in ways that are not appropriate. Carrying the culture is absolutely important, vital.
Yeah, I think as you say, Tom, that really helps to draw us together. It brings us, you know, there's a real strength actually when we carry the culture together. And I think as as you've been talking about, that actually it's a character development matter. You know, we often talk about how discipleship happens in teams, and actually what does discipleship look like? Well, it looks like becoming more like Jesus, but it's about being developed on the inside. And actually, as we choose to take on these kingdom characteristics, then actually it starts to refine us. And then actually when we come to a place where it's like, well, I would do the things this way, the culture would require me to do things a different way, actually choosing to do things the way that the culture suggests we do it is about developing as individuals.
Very important.
Sam, were you about to say something before I jumped in?
I was just going to touch on, Tom was talking about social media. I just want to say, like carrying culture is only effective if it's authentic. And that means it has to cover every single part of your life. You can't, it's really hard to live a double life, and you're not going to be able to maintain that. And actually, if you want to authentically carry the culture of the house, it needs to permeate every single aspect of your life. When you're at home, when you're at church, when you're at work. Yeah.
Very good.
So the first thing in terms of becoming fully engaged is to recognize that culture is created, that it happens by intention. The second thing we've talked about is the importance of carrying culture, of actually allowing it to shape your character, of choosing to put aside maybe your own preferences to be a culture carrier, that it's a matter of personal integrity really to be an authentically that in whatever situation you're in. So we've talked about creating, we've talked about carrying. The third thing is about communicating culture. And Pastor Tom, you've already been doing this expertly throughout the podcast so far, the language that you've been using and actually explaining the rationale. But do you want to say a bit more about what it means to communicate culture?
Well, I do. Yeah, I do. Communicate. In the early days, it was teach, explain, show, give examples. I think my wife turned off about 14 years ago, because every time we'd sit down with people, I'd go through the 5 ingredients of our culture. And I think she just got really sick of it. Even today, if I was to ask you, what are the 5 cultural ingredients of our church? She probably would get 3 out of the 5, she doesn't care. Me, on the other hand, every opportunity I could take, I would be talking to people about these are the ingredients. This is how it works. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like to be a person like this. And communicating this kind of culture is so vital, giving examples of what you want. Here comes the place of correction. I can still remember one of the early prayer meetings we had before a service, and there was one passionate young man rebuking the devil and shouting at the devil and telling the devil to go. Anyway, afterwards I looked at him and I said, we don't really give the devil that much airplay in our church. We're more about lifting up Jesus and worshiping Christ and bringing an atmosphere of faith and a spirit of excitement and inspiration. And those are the things. That's probably one of the greatest ways that we can fight the devil, is just lift up Jesus. Stop kicking the darkness, turn on the light. Language, explain, example. These were so important. And I can still remember the days when we were just trying to work out, what do we call those buckets that we receive our offering in, And I think someone says, well, Phil says buckets. And we decided we're going to call them containers. Everybody with a nice British accent can say containers. We changed our language. When people were getting saved, we decided that we were going to use the terminology of people are connecting with Jesus and his life and power. We're following Christ. From this day forward, I'll follow you. And people, you know, I mean, the whole term connection and following, these are all biblical concepts. There's nothing unbiblical about the kind of culture we're trying to explain to people. But we're giving examples of how we want it to look. We're encouraging other people to live it. You know, be down at the lockup by 5:30 in the morning. Be down there because you're the people that make Sundays work. If you weren't there, we wouldn't be able to do Sundays. And all of a sudden, people began to feel like, I have a real part to play in this. And the answer is you do. You have a very major part. And it's only as we explain that, you know, you can sit back and you can criticize people. Oh, they're lazy, or they couldn't care less, or, you know, or they're lying to me and saying they're not available when they were available, and they're doing this and doing that. To me, it's automatically I see that kind of stuff. And the first thing I think to myself is, have I done everything I can to communicate with these people the culture of our church? Have I done everything I can? Having done that, are these people who, will they have the ability to carry the culture, or will they just merely be echoes when it suits them? You know, so communicating culture, to me, it's really, really important. That's where correction comes in, where we correct what we see as off kilter. So to me, this whole subject of communicating, someone said to me, how long does it take to change the culture? Well, to change a church's culture is between 3 and 5 years. To create culture in a new place, approximately 3 years. So we're talking about a commitment to communicate, explain, unpack, unravel, reveal, speak, exemplify. In a few minutes, we'll talk about how people connect with the culture. But communication, so vital. I don't know, Sam, have you got any illustrations or stories from your experience of how culture was communicated to you maybe in the early days?
Yeah, well, I just want to start with saying, you know, for me coming into this culture and being one of the younger leaders in the life of our church, I think I was very naive in the early stages of thinking, you know, you can change culture really quickly, or you can help people understand the culture really quickly. And probably on the same page as Denise of like, why do you always repeat yourself, Tom? But actually, you find it is literally repetition. I can't remember the saying exactly, but people don't hear it the first time you say it. You have to repeat it again and again and again before they actually pick up.
Paul's right there. My mate Mark says to me, you repeat yourself a lot, don't you? I said, well, if you did what I told you to do, I'd stop repeating myself. Interesting, isn't it? When people don't listen, you feel like you've got to explain again and again and again until they finally get it. And at the end of the day, there are some people that don't get it. Other people get it when it's explained to them. And then there's this wonderful group of people like you guys who just get it and you flow with it. Sorry, Sam, keep going.
I think one of the other things as well with the repetition is that it doesn't matter how long you've been a part of the culture, repetition is always helpful. Yeah, even for me, you know, Phil's been here a little bit longer than me, but yeah, even when we repeat the culture, or you repeat the culture to us, Tom, and you're like, no, this is a pursuit of excellence, I want you to do this. Come on, guys. Have you thought about this? You know, we as a church have a culture of doing it this way. We need to still do it that way. And that repetition helps us remind us of why we're doing what we're doing, but it also helps us to remind everyone else. And I think we can easily think, you know, oh, that person's got it. You know, don't need to worry about encouraging them or reminding them about the culture, because, you know, they'll just get it on their own. But actually, the repetition helps everyone, no matter how far along the journey you are.
Yeah, and I think language creates culture is one of the things that I probably say to people more than anything else, because actually it's so true, you know, that actually our ideas are given form by the words that we use. And if we want to get ideas out there and help people to connect with an idea, you have to put language around it. And actually, we want to be really intentional about the language that we choose to put around pretty much everything that we do. And actually, it's that same thing of it happening by design, not by default, is actually being really careful about choosing the language that we use. And I think that's why there are certain phrases that are common in the life of our church, because actually we've chosen that. As Pastor Tom, you gave a great example. We talk about people connecting with Jesus because it's much more accessible than talking about people getting saved. The concept's not different. They're both valid. They're both valid language, but actually, you know, do we communicate in a way that means that if you've been in church for 5 minutes, you can understand a bit of what that means. And that's why I think phrases are so important. But also, I think it's really important as a leader that you can explain the culture. And actually, I think that's one of the key things that we sometimes, miss maybe with communicating culture, is that it's about, as you've been explaining, Tom, it's about helping people to understand this is why we do things the way that we do things, and actually one of the things that I found most helpful is to bounce that around with other leaders and to say, well, why do we do it this way? Why is it like that? How come, the call is one of those examples. Again, that's something that you could call 100 different things in different places, the altar call, the call for salvation. It took us probably an hour to decide that we were going to call the call. But actually then the way that we pray and the way that we approach that, we spent most of the day talking about that. But the confidence that gave me when I jump up on stage and do that moment, or when someone says, well, why do you pray what you pray? Well, actually, I've got the confidence of this is a proper discussion about this. And I think as leaders, we actually owe it to the people that follow to have thought through what we're saying and to be able to explain to them. And as a leader, I would expect you to be able to communicate all 5 of the culture points. And then if I say, explain this, that in 2 or 3 lines, you can give me a pen picture of this culture point is this. And Tom, you used to do this over and over again in meetings, and we were drilled into it partly out of, repetition, partly out of social embarrassment, just to make sure that we knew, you knew what you said when someone said generosity, pursuit of excellence. And I think, it's difficult to keep repeating these things over time, but actually repetition is so important. And sometimes people say to me, we say that the same way every time. And I'm like, yeah. And if ever I say it exactly the same over and over again, it's because it's really important. And I've thought about it a lot. And I think this is the best way to say it, because I don't take a chance on the most important bits of anything we communicate. If I keep saying it the same, it's probably because actually I've really worked hard on crafting the language around that point of whatever it is that we're doing.
And the purpose and the goal of communicating culture is to help people to connect with it. And, for me, one of my major ministries in the life of our church is to see people who have got a touch of God on their life and who've got the potential to be leaders. One of the saddest parts is that I've met so many people with potential that aren't really willing to do much about it. They don't want to connect with the culture. They like the worship, they like the preaching, they like the atmosphere, the environment's cool. They get to meet up with their friends every Sunday. We've got good tea, good coffee, great chit chatters out there. They know that if they have a problem, they can call on somebody, but that's about it. They don't actually want to connect with the culture and actually start living it. And, even though they've got great leadership qualities about them, some of the things that I said to you, Sam, right in the very, 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 very beginning is you're going to have to be more than just a pleasant smile. You're going to have to be somebody that connects with this, carries it, and helps others to connect with it as well. And you have been incredibly successful in doing that. And I love the way you articulate things in a fresh and authentic manner. It really does me good, because I know that you're not just repeating the company line. You've actually ingested it. You've actually made it yours, and it comes out in your language. And I like that. I like that a lot. Connecting people. That's where we find leaders, especially as the church is in its early stage. You're looking for as many different leaders as you can, because you've got a dozen teams that need leadership, and you've got a dozen people that you need to lead other people in that team. So if you're not getting people connecting with the culture, you're going to lack leaders. We say it all the time, servanthood. We're not here to abuse you. People say, oh, I feel like I'm being used. Well, you offered yourself as a servant. We promise we won't abuse you, but we will take advantage of the time, your talent, and your treasure as you give it to us. So, connecting with that is a really important thing. Let me talk about this. Is bringing others into the circle. It's finding people who want your culture too. And I'll say it again: spirit over skill, character over charisma. I've met a lot of, skilled and charismatic people who think they're the ant's pants, and they come in and they want that prominence straight away. And you think, well, actually there's a process for leadership. There's a process. We want to see that you've connected with our culture. We want to know that you've got the character to hold what we're about to give you the responsibility for. And it's been unfortunate at times to see people who you see with just oozing with potential, who want to be used, but lack the character to be able to hold the charisma that they've got. And your heart breaks. So seeing people connect is really, really important. It's us encouraging the right spirit, celebrating when others reflect the culture, endorsing good behavior. If someone acts badly, I'm not going to reward them for that bad behavior. I will point their bad behavior out and say, that's really unacceptable. And we really don't appreciate this very much at all. But we will celebrate good behavior and good spirit and good attitude. That's why we want to provide some sort of encouragement to our volunteers. We want to honor 2 or 3 volunteers every time we get together for that together, all in.
All in. That's, oh gosh.
That's
I made
right.
a language mistake there. That's the old.
But we're honoring volunteers. We're celebrating them. We're continuing to invest in others on a regular basis. One of the things that Denise does, on a regular basis is her one-on-ones with people. And they're very, very important. And I've been inspiring her to do Zoom one-on-ones with people as well, or at least FaceTime. She knows how to do that. But those times are to reinforce the culture in people's lives, because it's not by default, it's by design. And you've got to work at creating that culture in your own life and in the people around you. And that means you need to be connected to it. And then, of course, we start all over again. I'm looking at 2 generations right here in front of me, Phil, and then you. We've been through 3 cycles so far. The first 5 years, then 10 years, now 15 years. So we've been through 3 cycles of this, already, as far as developing people and understanding the culture. But that's what we need to do. Sam, it's your job to begin connecting with the next generation, those that are under you. And Phil, it's your job to keep connecting with that next generation as well as the people around you. And for me as well, you'll find that I'm always out there on the lookout for new leaders. I get my heart broken every now and then because I see someone with incredible potential, but they just don't want to connect.
I do think that's a big part of the challenge for us as leaders as well, Tom. I think in the early days, the people being connected into leadership was very much something that you did. And that actually that was, you've always modeled that for us. But I also think that actually as church gets bigger, and as things change, as we all kind of get older as well, that actually it's so much more important that we as leaders take on that responsibility for connecting others in. And I fully agree that there are times when there are great individuals who refuse or really don't want to kind of pay the price to carry the culture themselves. But I also think sometimes as leaders, we have to take responsibility for creating a compelling understanding of what's so great about connecting with the culture. And the number of times that you see that actually we want people to recognize that there's a place for them, that they're going to develop positively, that yes, there might be challenges along the way, but they're going to come out better. My life's been so radically changed by, connecting with the culture of our church that I can't even begin to put it into words. And that's what I want for other people. But I have a responsibility to present that in a compelling way. One of the things that I'm often conscious of is, sometimes we invite people to join team and we sound so desperate. No, we just need people. We need someone. We just need you to help out. No. Actually, what we want to do is we want people to get a sense of the opportunity. Here's your chance to make a difference. Here's your chance to have a meaningful impact on the world. Isn't that what we all want? Don't we all want the opportunity to make a difference? Here's your chance to make a difference. And yes, it looks like, cleaning the toilet. So maybe now it looks like editing video or whatever it is that it looks like in the different context of that. But actually as leaders, our responsibility is not to be like, well, Tom's going to connect people to the culture. No. If I'm a leader, my job is to connect people to the culture. And the way that I do that isn't about, arm twisting, badgering people. It's about creating a compelling sense of what's so powerful about being a part of it.
And, it's those moments when people say, I decide to embrace this culture. I want to be part of this. For leaders that sit back and criticize the people around them, that's not very helpful at all. It's not a great look. We need to be inspiring people around us. We need to be teaching and learning how to motivate people to do these kinds of things. I remember in the very, very early days when I was chatting with Owen at one point, and I said, I need to know what motivates you. And that's different for everybody. And, as a leader, I need to take responsibility. The buck stops with me. If I go to set up and nobody turns up, guess what? I'm going to set up and I'm going to have a good spirit and a good attitude about it. If it comes to church news and you don't have any help because, the computer's broken down and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I can see you smiling already, Phil, and then Nick Kane comes on and goes, it won't be the last time you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning doing stuff. It's the spirit of the can do, I will, whatever it takes spirit, and here's the point. You'll get so desperate that you will actually start to inspire and encourage people about this great culture that we're talking about, and they'll catch it and they'll go, I want to be part of this. And then you've got somebody else to join you. You've actually been able to connect that person into the culture, and they become someone that you can put pressure on and rely upon. They take responsibility. They're responsible.
Yeah. And I'd say, don't tell them they're going to have to stay up till 3 a.m. Tell them why you stay up until 3 a.m. Because actually, I didn't sign up. What caught me, Tom, I'm not here because you said, hey, Phil, here's an opportunity to clean more toilets than you ever want to clean in your life. Here's the opportunity to set out chairs, pick up bits of paper from the floor, or edit video at 3 a.m. I signed up because you said, well, what if we presented the message of Jesus to your generation in a relevant way? And I was like, yeah, I am on board with that. And whatever it takes to do that, I'm there. And I'm still there. But actually, I think sometimes let's not tell people what the job is necessarily. Let's tell people why we care about it.
Yeah. Sam?
Yeah, I think it's easy for us to wear, our tiredness or our effort as a badge of honor, but actually it doesn't help us at all as leaders, because it, as Phil's alluded to, it puts people off. Actually, we need to be there with inspiration of, as Phil said, why is it that we do what we do? What motivates us to do it, to put in those hours? And actually, what could your life look like if you engaged with this culture, if you chased after the things that we're chasing after, because we want to see this city changed, we want to see people connect with Jesus. That's why we're putting in all of this effort and all of this time. It looks different for different people. I think people are at a different stage in their journey and their relationship with culture and all that. So I think inspiration has got to be at the forefront.
I talk about passion a lot. I'm passionate about the DNA of our church. I'm passionate about us being an outwardly focused church. I'm passionate about trying to reach people that are unchurched. I'm passionate about my city, Norwich, Ipswich, Bratislava. I love these cities. I remember one of the guys was driving me in Bratislava and he goes, oh, I hate Bratislava. I said, what? It's a great city, wonderful city. I love this city. No, I don't like it. I said, well, you should move because I love this city. He became very quiet after that.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love in Ipswich, actually, is seeing the passion that everyone has in Ipswich. Talking to Dave Marcus, there's just such a genuine passion to see the people of Ipswich connect with Jesus. And there's just something so powerful about that, and I think passion trumps perfection as well. Like, I think sometimes we worry about getting it exactly right all the time, but sometimes it's just good to just show people why you care. And I think people can really connect with it when you get a sense of why you actually care about something. I've got bad news for you, gentlemen. We've gone beyond what we intended to in terms of time. Our aim with these podcasts is to be at about half an hour. We've given you another 10 minutes of extra free so far. So we should probably draw things to a close. I don't know if there's any final remarks that either of you want to share.
No. Close us out.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Wherever you're listening to it, watching it, whatever you're doing, it's so great that you've been able to join us for Culture Club. As you can see, there is still so much to be said about culture. We hope that this has been really useful. We'd love to hear from you if you've enjoyed it. You can comment if you're wherever you consume this, whether it's on YouTube or in Spotify, Apple. There is scope to comment, there's scope to rate this. You can always email us. You just, it's our name at proclaimers.com for all three of us. We'd love to hear from you. We'll have a Q&A happening as well at the weekend if you're watching this in real time. And if you're listening to it much, much later on, I'm sorry you missed that, but I hope that it's still been a helpful part of this. We'll be back next week with something else that will be special, continuing to explore this whole idea of culture. But we hope that today has been a really useful exploration of the 4 C's of culture. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Pastor Tom. It's been a pleasure. Take care of yourselves, everybody, and we will see you next time around. Goodbye. God bless.